Welcome to the Open RN Project Transforming Nursing Education webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speakers. Kim Ernstmeyer is a certified nurse educator and a certified healthcare stimulation educator. She has extensive experience leading collaborative teams, creating evidence-based open educational resources. As the curriculum project manager of the ARISE project, she led a multidisciplinary team creating 150 augmented reality stimulations and serious games available on Skills Common with over 50,000 international downloads. The Open RN project is funded by a $2.5 million grant from the Department of Education to create 5 nursing OER textbooks and 25 virtual reality simulations. 3 Open RN textbooks were Best OER Award winners from the OE Global in 2020 and in 2021. Vince Mussehl is the library director at Chippewa Valley Technical College in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. He has served as faculty and department chair in the Library and Information Services Associate Degree Program using only no-cost resources as content, including OER. Since the launching of the Open RN project in 2019, he has served as the lead librarian, a project that is projected to save Wisconsin nursing students $1.5 million annually. As the leader in open education, he has led the Affordable Learning Community at CVTC and saw student savings of over $1 million during the 2020 to 2021 academic year. He also facilitates faculty professional development surrounding open education in Wisconsin and nationally. I'm now going to hand over moderator privilege to Kim and let them get started. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting us to share our project. Vince will be talking initially about our learning objectives. So Vince, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you, Kim, and everyone for the welcome. We're happy to be here today. So just to get started, the learning objectives for today, by the end of this session, we hope that you'll be able to describe open educational resources, otherwise known as OER. You'll be able to discuss the Open RN project. You're going to be able to tour the Open RN resources, and then you'll be able to explain how to access the Open RN textbooks and virtual simulations. So we wanted to start off with just a little bit of background today. So before we get too into it, I wanted to talk about what OER is for those of you that might not know. OER, or Open Educational Resources, are any teaching and learning material that is free and openly licensed with permissions to use. So there's really some criteria that make up OER. And if you look towards the bottom of the screen here, we have what we say are the 5R requirements. So you should be able to retain the work, basically keep it forever, perpetually, be able to access it perpetually. You can reuse it. So you can reuse it for whatever you think is necessary, whether it's teaching students, using it in the industry, or maybe you're using it to publish something on your own. Revise. You should be able to revise the content. So if there's updates you want to make, maybe you want to put in local examples, you're able to do that with OER. Remix it. You can combine different resources and put them together. So if you find something you like in maybe a medical terminology book that you want to include in a nursing book, you're able to do that. And then of course, redistribute.
Hey Vince, this is Edward.
Yeah.
You forgot to share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was. Thank you for letting me know.
You're welcome.
Can you see it?
Not yet. Almost. Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
All right. So these are the 5Rs at the bottom that I was speaking of. Retain, reuse, revise, remix, and then redistribute. So again, redistribute means you're sharing the work with others. So this is where, as faculty, for example, you can share it with other faculty, you can share it with your students, and you can share it with industry. So briefly, open licensing. I'm sure some of you have heard of Creative Commons. That's essentially the open licensing that OER would typically fall under. It's just a means to let other people know that you're sharing your work and you don't expect any sort of permission that's to be sought out. And these licenses kind of vary depending on how the authors want to share their work. And it really, if you look towards the public domain, and it's the most free, the most open, that includes things that are no longer copyrighted, maybe a book from many years ago. It can include things like government, anything that's just born in public domain is included in that realm. And then you go all the way over to the right. It's the most, I should say it's the least open. So you're still able to use it and follow the 5 R's. You're just not necessarily able to benefit from it commercially or make derivatives of it. So make changes in new work and then reopen it, republish it. So, and then of course, copyright is demonstrating the scale here. So kind of why are we even talking about OER, or why is this important right now? So if you look at the screen here, we have a chart that's talking, or that shows you the cost of textbooks and the trends involved with that. So for the past 10, 15 years, and even further since the 1970s, the cost of textbooks has just been increasing at a really dramatic rate, much more so than many other items, including tuition and fees. You can see that here. Now I know we have big inflation right now, but looking at trends and patterns, this is kind of how it's played out. We also know in the academic world that 2 in 3 students opt out of textbooks because it costs too high. So they don't even buy the book. We know that 1 in 2 students take fewer classes because textbook costs. So if a textbook costs $300, they might not have enough money to pay for another class. And we also know that less than 1 in 2 students purchase a current textbook edition. So if there's a 10th edition, a student might try to get by with a very low cost 8th edition, 9th edition, or even 7th edition. All right, next up is Kim, and she's going to talk about the impact of the OpenRN project.
Thank you, Vince. So as you heard in the introduction, we received a $2.5 million grant from the Department of Ed in 2019 to create 5 nursing OER textbooks. And all these textbooks have CC BY licensing, as Vince was explaining previously. 3 of the books have already been published, Pharmacology, Fundamentals, and Skills, both ebooks, and we also work collaboratively with Xanadu, who publishes the OpenStax textbooks also, to create affordable print versions of these textbooks, because we all learned, especially during the COVID pandemic, not all students have good internet access. So it's important for them to have print versions. We also supply free downloadable versions as well, but the print versions actually look like a real textbook, which is nice. We just released the 4th textbook on nursing management and professional concepts. The ebook was released last week, and the print version should be available in bookstores and on Amazon in August. The mental health book we're finishing up right now, and will undergo a national peer review process this summer, with the print version anticipated for January of 2023. In addition to these 5 textbooks, we're also creating 25 virtual simulations using H5P software, which we'll demonstrate a little bit later in the presentation, as well as 25 totally immersive virtual reality simulations. So in creating these, we have over 16 Wisconsin technical colleges that are involved. They're all standalone colleges, separately accredited, but we're collaborating. We have a statewide nursing curriculum that we use to build these books so they can be easily implemented in all of these 16 technical colleges. At the beginning of the project, we anticipated impacting over 5,700 students just in Wisconsin alone annually. This project has already grown nationally, so we anticipate much higher numbers, and I'll show you here in a second the international impact it's making. We also projected over $1.5 million in savings just in Wisconsin, and again, we're seeing that spread across the country, so really great to see. Over 300 faculty, librarians, and industry members have participated in reviewing the textbooks as part of the peer review process. So we really believe that contributes to the quality of these textbooks. And then finally, we've trained over 200 faculty and administrators on OER champions, and Vince will be talking about that a little bit later in the presentation too. So if we go to the next slide, you can see all the different colleges in the left-hand column from in Wisconsin Technical College system. Over 75% have adopted one or more textbooks. On the right side, you can see the different colleges in the United States and in Canada who have reported adopting the textbook. So really exciting to see how this project has grown nationally. If we look at the next slide, you can see the impact we're making internationally. So as you heard in the introduction, the first 3 books did win the Best OER Award from OE Global, which I think helped to spread the word about this. We're also participating in the OE for a Better World project from UNESCO, because we do address the Sustainable Development Goals. And so you can see we have over 900,000 users and over 2.5 million page views of the textbooks. If you're interested in seeing which countries are using it, on the next slide, you can see United States is about 50%, and then the top 5 round out with the Philippines, India, Canada, and Australia. So really fun to see those numbers as well. On the next slide, you can see from in the first academic year, which was 2020 to 2021, where we have data. This was the first textbook, the nursing pharmacology book, that was published. And you can see in Wisconsin alone, the number of students that were using the textbook for a total of 1,259. And this ended up being a cost savings of almost $194,000 with the first year alone. So we just anticipate this next year, this will grow even more because the 3 textbooks that are currently being used and as it spreads, as we said. The next slide is really exciting as an educator because not only are we saving students money, but we're improving their success in the courses. So this data you can see for the different semesters starting back in spring of 2020 for the nursing pharmacology course. The blue is for all WTCS pharmacology courses, and the green is for the sections using OER. And by the time the academic year was over, you can see that the OER sections had an 80.5% student success rate, which was 5% higher than the non-OER courses. So really great to see that. You know, as Vince mentioned, a lot of students don't purchase the textbooks or use the old textbooks. So this could be one of the factors. Another thing is the textbooks are completely aligned with the statewide curriculum. And another thing is the learning activities that we include. So we include a lot of formative assessments, including the virtual simulations that we'll showcase here shortly. On the next slide, you can see the survey results that we have so far in our textbooks. There is a survey link that we encourage faculty and students to participate in. There's 7 different criteria we ask them to rate in terms of quality of the textbook, cost of the textbook, the ease of use, the helpfulness of the learning activities, the inclusion of current evidence-based sources, and navigating to other sources. It's another thing we've learned over the past year, especially is students need to know what are credible sources. And so we purposely provide hyperlinks to the CDC, the DEA, the World Health Organization, all these things that are really important for nurses in practice to be able to refer back to. And then the last criteria is in assisting and applying this content to the patient care, which is what we use the virtual simulations to do. So, so far we've had 198 respondents. 86% of those were students and 12% were faculty, and 93% or more on all criteria were rated as the OER was the same, better, or much better than their traditional textbooks. So great to see the student feedback on that as well. So you might be wondering, how do I access these resources? So the best place to go is to our website, www.cvtc.edu/openrn. On this website, you can read a little bit more about the project, and you can also see the direct links to the ebooks or the printable PDF, which means the edited PDF that Xanadu created and is providing free. That correlates with the print version. It's the same exact content as the ebooks, it's just in a more condensed form. So those are both available here. We'll be adding the management link here in the next week or so. So let's take a peek at the fundamentals book. So if you click on view online, this is what the book looks like within Pressbooks. Students can click on read book, and then on the left side, you can see like a table of contents to expand the content within the book. So we're going to go actually to chapter 15, which is one of the most difficult chapters in this entry-level course, fluid and electrolyte balance. So you can see the different sections, and we modeled this after how OpenStax textbooks were structured. On 15.8 is in all the chapters, we put learning activities in a separate section so students can go directly there. If they're trying to do this mostly offline, they know when they're able to get online, they can go directly to this area. This chapter has examples of both written case studies for those students that are trying to practice applying this material offline, as well as the H5P activities underneath these two scenarios here. So the first activity we include in all the chapters are just basic flashcards for the vocabulary that the students need to learn and apply to information. So this is just a great way to start on that lower Bloom's taxonomy level and just help them gain that knowledge and memorize. The next example is an example of a drag and drop activity, which kind of mirrors some of the things they have to do on their board exam now. There's a lot of drag and drop. So this is just initially getting them used to dragging and dropping. When they put in the answers and they check, it can show their progress, and they can retry and then see the correct answers. So they get immediate feedback. The next example is just fill in the blank. So as they fill in, it's going to tell them, are you correct or incorrect? Let's see there we go. So you can see the red one is the incorrect, or the green is the correct. And then the most exciting thing that we're doing is, I believe, with the virtual simulations. So this is an example of a virtual simulation that we created using free H5P software and a branching scenario. Students proceed through the activity. And what we've done is we pulled a lot of the media that we used in a previous project called the ARISE project, which created over 150 augmented reality simulations. So you can see we have videos here. Here's a handoff nursing report, just like what students would receive in practice. If we keep going forward, you can see some of the questions as they go through this. They have to apply some of the pathophysiology. Again, they can check their answers. There's images. Here's some images of a TED hose that they wear, for example. So it really adds that contextual learning piece as they're, not just memorizing dry material, but seeing how it truly applies in practice. We also include, and this is purposefully dark. This is a patient video where the patient is telling them first thing in the morning when they first enter the room, it's still dark. How he's feeling. They have to prioritize what they're hearing in terms of what symptoms he's having and where to go forward. So really helps get them from that knowledge level up into the application level as they learn this content, as they need to do as a student. So that's an example of the virtual simulations. Oh, I should show this too. This is exciting. This is another piece. So they can actually hear heart sounds and lung sounds as they're assessing the patient, just like they would in a simulation lab. And then they can check if what they're hearing, if their selection is correct and how they describe it. So really great chance for them to practice this material. So I think let's go on to the next slide, Vince, because I want to spend some time talking about virtual reality. So what we just demonstrated is an example of number 3, and H5P online independent activity. We're calling that the online virtual simulations. Those truly are open educational resources. They have CC BY licensing. They can be accessed by just a hyperlink on any device that a student has where they can access the internet. The other two types of virtual reality in the education world is the total immersion piece, and number 1, where they wear a VR headset, they have the hand controllers, and they're immersed in an environment. However, that can create some barriers, and we learned that especially during COVID, because they have to go into a lab, they have to put on the headsets, and so there were some barriers with that. So we created a second option where the virtual reality environment is screen broadcast, just like we're doing now through Zoom, and it can be broadcast to any number of students. The students would then tell the faculty member what they would like to do. So they're basically directing the faculty to, for example, get vital signs, listen to heart sounds, administer medication. So they're still doing that critical thinking. They're just not having to be in a headset to do so. We use the product that we use is a Catechus software, and then they use the Oculus Rift headsets as part of that, along with Alienware laptops, just the more gaming type laptops to be able to do that immersion. So far we have 5 virtual reality scenarios and those scenarios have teaching plans that are totally open educational resources. So if faculty don't have this product, they can still use the scenario plans to lead simulation at their colleges. So if we go to the next slide, I kind of talked about most of this already, but we have established 4 VR centers in Wisconsin at 4 of the different technical colleges. We use that Catechus VR software, as I mentioned. And then if let's click on this first link here, this virtual reality scenario. So this is just a video. There's no sound, just so I can explain what's happening. But this is a virtual reality environment that we created specifically for first semester entry-level nursing students that in Wisconsin tend to be in long-term care centers. So this is Miles. He's a resident of a long-term care center and he has dementia. And so you can see in this video how the student is getting blood pressure, trying to get other vitals. Miles is shaking his head. He doesn't want to really participate. So the student needs to use therapeutic communication techniques to explain what's happening and keep him calm and comfortable while they gather the important data they need in order to administer his cardiac medication safely. So you can see on the right side of the bed, there's a simulated electronic medical record that has a MAR and different provider orders. There's a drawer with the medications, and then you can see the medications being administered to Miles. This is another example of another virtual reality environment with a pediatric patient who just had a tonsillectomy. She's still having some pain. Her parents just had to leave and take care of the other children at home. And so she's experiencing some separation anxiety. And the nursing students have to address that. And both of these scenarios were built on feedback from our advisory committee, who said, the nursing students are good at the skills of giving medications, taking vitals, things like that, but they need more practice in learning how to deal with agitated patients. And so that's what we've been using as we develop these virtual reality scenarios, is just allowing these patients to become more agitated until the students use the appropriate techniques to calm them down. So let's go to the next slide. We do include survey links in all of the virtual simulations. So those H5P, like what we demonstrated with the heart failure scenario. So far we have over 575 respondents. 94% of those are students. So it's really great to hear the student voice in this. And this is one of the questions. How does this scenario increase your interest in completing the learning experience compared to a traditional case study? Over 93% agreed or strongly agreed that the videos and images increase their interest. On the next slide, we asked, is the scenario clinically accurate, current, and relevant to practice? And over 93% agreed or strongly agreed with that. And then the final slide, it was in terms of clinical judgment. And so for those of you involved in nursing education, you are aware there's a new clinical judgment model that was developed by the NCSBN that is used will be used to create questions on their board exam. It's been piloted over the past few years, and they anticipate rolling it out in 2023. So the clinical judgment piece is really important to allow them to practice those type of questions. And if you look at the different simulations we've created near the end of the list, there's several that have incorporated those next generation type activities. And so 94% agree that the virtual simulations help develop that clinical judgment. If you go to the next slide, another place where these are located, in addition to on our website, Libra Text, which is one of the other award winners from the Open Textbook Pilot Project, has our collection of materials out there, just as another place where things can be easily remixed. So that's another option to go to, and our books are out there as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk more about how we're scaling OER across the state and our college.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, so one of the ways that we're scaling OER, both at our institution and beyond, is we're offering a course called OER 101. We found that trying to get faculty and stakeholders on the same page about what OER is and how it benefits students really was a starting point for people. It's hard to advocate for the project if they don't have a true background on that. So as a solution, we created an online asynchronous course that's conducted in our LMS Canvas. And the course really is about 10 to 15 hours long, but it's very flexible and goes over about a month time period. The course has been very successful so far. We've seen over 200 graduates of the course since January 2020. And last year during Open Education Week, we surveyed our alumni to see, how they were doing with OER and the OER journeys and so forth. And we found that of the people that we surveyed, and we had a survey response rate of about 39%. We found that almost 74% had already implemented some form of OER into their class. And this affected 78 courses for for 4,019 students. And it yielded a savings of $555,270, which is interesting because this is outside of our institution. So this might be colleges at any of the locations listed below in that image. So that was good news for us. So just at our institution, CVTC is a leader in Wisconsin in terms of OER. Last year, we saw our impact we affected over 4,000 students and saved them over $1 million. So last year was the first year where we hit that $1 million mark. And this was in 85 courses in over 340 sections. So our institutional research department calculated that this affected average $246 per student. And then also to kind of get more faculty on board and provide a platform of support and sustainability and also advocacy, we started an OER symposium in the state. So it was a free event that had multiple speakers from the different colleges and institutions and some from outside. So publishing speakers would speak to our group. We had other grant speakers such as LibreText, which Kim mentioned earlier, participate just to kind of educate faculty, keep the momentum going, and then make sure that we're keeping people up to date on new trends. And we did this through applying for a number of grants and funding streams. So OpenRN, the project that we're speaking about today, really helped kind of spearhead this effort at our institution. It really provided an inspirational kind of motive for faculty to be involved in something like creating resources or publishing a textbook seemed really out of reach for faculty until this project kind of came about. Kim's going to talk about some lessons that we learned next.
Sorry about that. We just finished year 3 of our project, so we have 1 year to go. And collaboration truly has been the key for quality. So many people ask, how did you do this? So I mentioned we had the state curriculum. that we started with. It's really helped us hit the ground running because we used, we're competency-based curriculum. So for every competency in a course, we developed one or more chapters depending on how it played out. So we developed work groups that contain members from across the different colleges in Wisconsin. Then we met monthly, and we used Google Docs. So as people volunteered to be a developing author and develop the different information for the chapter, then others from across the state would put comments in, and then we would come together and discuss it again, the following month, and talk about what learning activities worked in their classrooms and went from there. The other type of collaboration that we use is the peer reviewers. So for each textbook, we've had approximately 70 national reviewers. They complete a rubric, and they also use Hypothesis, which is another free product where they can go in and make comments directly at the sentence level or the word level and provide feedback. And that's just contributed even more quality as we get broader perspectives on the different content and vocabulary, things like that. One thing I haven't mentioned, and I saw one of the questions came through, we are very aligned with the NCLEX test plan. So it's not just Wisconsin state curriculum, it's the overall test plan for entry-level nurses. We use that to scope out the content. So the AACN Essentials just came out. The latest ones just came out in the past year or so, I believe. And so those are threaded throughout, but we're not as specifically aligned with that as we are with the NCLEX test plan, since that's what the students need to know in order to pass their boards. So yes, but the specific alignment is with the NCLEX test plan. So one thing we have learned, at least within our project, is this faculty guided inquiry process. So if you look on the right side here, this is really a model that's used just for research and searching for information and how people may feel. And we found this really applied to our project as well. So as we started each book, you can see the feelings, thoughts, and actions there are the different rows. And so most faculty start with a feeling of uncertainty. The project is kind of vague. What is OER? What sources can I use? They start searching for information, and they're trying to figure out, what's public domain? What is this different type of Creative Commons licensing? And as they learn more about OER and see what resources are already out there, they start to feel a little bit more optimism. But then as they do a little bit more exploration and actually start the process of writing, they do tend to feel a little bit of confusion. Really that imposter syndrome kind of kicks in. Like, who am I to write a textbook? And we encourage them. We said, you are the experts in the classroom level. We're not saying you're an expert in this topic. Obviously, there are other researchers that have done the background information development, knowledge development, but you are the experts in teaching this to students. So we encourage them, write it like you teach it. And then we'll go back in and edit it and make sure that we're using consistent vocabulary throughout. We use a clear voice, clear language, and a single voice throughout. So there's quite a bit of editing to reach that point. But as faculty see this process and actually, put pen to paper or type, they feel more clarity, they feel more sense of direction. They get better at finding, the resources that have the Creative Commons licensing. And then by the time we're done and they see the finished project, just a huge level of satisfaction and a job well done. So we've seen that play out across all 5 books so far. So I always like to share that, because if anyone's leading a project, you want to be ready to address these feelings and reassure faculty as they go through this process. Some of the other resources that we've used to help, especially at the beginning of the project when we were scoping it out and figuring out how we were going to write this and do this, was CCC OER is a national organization of community colleges. They have a lot of different webinars and are very supportive in the OER development process. And then there's also a Rebus Guide to Publishing that was very helpful and just in a very black and white information. And how do you write a textbook? How do you collaborate? How do you do the review process? So that was very helpful as we got the project off the ground. And then another question that we get quite frequently is about sustainability. Faculty especially are hesitant to move to a new textbook unless they know that this is going to be around for a while. And so what we did is we worked, as I mentioned, with Xanadu, who publishes the OpenStax textbooks, and they are committed to creating affordable textbooks. And what they offered to do was give a $5 royalty back to CVTC, who was the publisher of these textbooks. We put it in a specially earmarked fund so that when the grant funding ends, we will have money to reimburse faculty to go back through the textbooks as the new NCLEX RN test plans come out, make sure that there are any updates are made to reflect those changes in the test plan, or include any new evidence-based practices that need to be taught to students. So that's our sustainability plan, along with all the work that Vince has been doing in training faculty across the state on using OER. So that is the end of our presentation. I know that there's a lot of questions out in the chat box, but as we mentioned, the best place to go for our materials is our website here at www.cvtc.edu/openrn. It's a place where you can sign up for quarterly performance reports. We share the reports that we submit to the Department of Ed, along with all the updates that have happened in the past quarter. And if you're interested in being a peer reviewer for the mental health book, this would be a place you can sign up and indicate your interest.
Awesome. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation. And so we will go ahead and open it up to questions. We did have a couple in the chat, so we'll start with those. So it looks like someone asked, what headset or product is used for the immersion virtual realities?
So that's the Oculus Rift headset that we use, and I believe that's going to be discontinued at the end of the year and going with the Verve headset. Things are always rapidly changing in the VR world, but that's what we use.
Okay. And then another question was, how hard is it to develop the custom scenarios in Atticus?
That's a great question. So one of the reasons when we did the selection process for the VR vendor, we did a needs analysis with an advisory group from simulation technicians and faculty from across the state. And one of the things that came through loud and clear was the ability for faculty to be able to create or customize their own scenarios. And so we selected a catechist because after they program an initial scenario, like what we showed with Miles Johnson in the long-term care center, faculty have what's called or technicians have a simulation manager. And so they're able to change and tweak whatever's going on in that scenario. So you can pick a different site. Maybe they're in a hospital, or maybe they're in their home. We actually have EMS students using a catechist also. So maybe it's a triage situation, out with a multi-vehicle accident. So you have really, the sky's the limit in terms of the environment or the type of patient that you use. And then you can, on the fly or pre-program vital signs, lung sounds, heart sounds. So that part, once you select your environment and your patient, it's very easy to create custom scenarios because you have all the tools ready to go. They are working with us right now on creating what's called a universal patient, as well as an OB simulator. And so once those products are released by a catechist, really there's no limit to the number of scenarios that we can do, because the universal patient is modeled after the high fidelity simulators that are used in simulation labs right now. So we're hoping that the VR patient will very closely model the high fidelity simulators. So really exciting.
Awesome. And someone brought up that Google Docs is often blocked by their institutional servers. Is there another way so they're not able to open that VR scenario link? Is there an alternative way to access this information?
So good question. So the virtual simulations, if you can't access the Google Doc, then go to the Libra Text Studio, and that's where all the different virtual simulations are listed. LibreText also has our textbooks as part of their collection. And what's nice about LibreText, since we have a couple minutes, is they have a remixing tool so that anyone could go in, pull up different textbooks and then pull sections from the different textbooks. It automatically renumbers the chapters, all the figure numbers, etc. And you, from what I hear, you hit publish and there is your own remixed OER textbook. So they make it very easy to adapt existing OER to your learning objectives at your institution.
And then we had another one. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat. This is awesome. Do you know how many students go on to get a BSN?
We have quite a few in Wisconsin. I don't have the percentage off the top of my head. I could definitely look it up for you. But because Mayo Clinic, especially, is one of our local hospitals, they and other hospitals like them hire students with ADNs with the expectation that within 5 to 6 years they get their BSN. And most students are doing that now. So once they complete their ADN, most of them go on and complete an online BSN completion program. And then a lot of employers like Mayo will reimburse them to do that. So it's really a great way for them to get out there, get started, help fill the shortage that's happening, that's gotten even worse because of the COVID pandemic, and then move on and get their BSN. And then many go on and get their MSN and doctorate also.
And then someone also wanted to know, do you have any repositories for non-textbook OER resources like lessons plans, curriculum, etc.?
Sorry about that. I just shared a list of resources. It'll take you to a web page that'll have kind of a directory of sources. Within that web page, I would recommend starting with Search with Oasis, which is kind of like a Google of open educational resources. And then all of these little subsites, for example, OpenStax or Open Textbook Library, they have a lot of these materials as well. So you just need to search for your topics and then kind of narrow it down with keywords and so forth, and you should be able to find at least some of those. There's certainly much more OER textbooks or OER content than there is supplementary materials. But I think that's something that a lot of institutions have been working towards to get more of that available for teachers to make it more seamless for them to transition.
Yeah, it looks like we're getting a couple more questions about the VR stuff. So someone wanted to know, is Atticus an annual paid subscription for your institution? And are you able to share your scenarios as OERs once you produce them?
Yes, so Atticus is a separate vendor, but the way they charge is it's basically when we started was $10,000 per year per virtual room. So you can access that virtual room from anywhere across the country. Students from different locations can meet in that virtual room. And so really, when you compare it to other products, is reasonable, very reasonable. And the hardware costs keep coming down every year as VR takes off. And yes, absolutely, the OpenRN scenarios are OER, and we'll be sharing those on the website. And I'm also working with LibreText to upload those as a separate collection on LibreText as well.
And then it looks like they also wanted to know, do you provide technical support for faculty to create content in the system? Or is that from your IT folks, librarians, elsewhere?
We don't provide specific IT support outside of the 4 lead colleges that are working on this. But if Vince can probably talk more about Pressbooks and the support they provide if you decide to use that as your platform. One nice thing about Pressbooks is not only is it available in the ebook form that we demonstrated, but there are several different types of free downloadable versions that you can provide also.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, earlier in the presentation, we try to use Google Docs. And I've heard that sometimes it's blocked by institutions, but in education, they're often open. It's a common educational tool. So we start with that because the support needed for publishing in press books, for example, there is a bit of a learning curve. It's not as simple as putting it into a word processing document. So that's why we start the project in Google Docs. And then only a few people are in the Pressbooks platform, which then we don't have to train multiple people on it. And Pressbooks itself has a great support, customer support team. So if we do have questions or any problems, they even work out like fixes or workarounds, sometimes enhancements based on some of our feedback. So all in all, it's been pretty good so far.
Awesome. And then it looks like there's some more interest in about the BSN program. So how has response and uptake been from the BSN programs?
That's a really good question. So back on, at the beginning of our presentation, we had a list of different colleges and universities that are using it. And because in nursing, because you can be a registered nurse, whether you have an ADN or a BSN, the content is really the same for passing the NCLEX. So for these courses, which are, common or, included maybe in, multiple books could be used in the same course. It's common content that is used in any program. So we're getting quite a bit of interest, especially from Arizona and California, where I believe there's legislation requiring the adoption of OER for students, just so they have that material available day one. It promotes equity, so all students have equal access to the learning resources they need to be successful.
Awesome. And then I also wanted to know, what were your biggest challenges in implementing this virtual simulation with students, and how was the student response?
So student, based on the survey results, the virtual simulations that are accessible via hyperlinks, like we saw the heart failure simulation, they're about 10 to 15 minutes long. We've gotten excellent feedback on that because students can try it immediately as they're going through the chapter and get feedback on their the accuracy of their knowledge and help them apply it. So the VR, as I mentioned, has students really enjoy the VR. I would say it's the faculty, because of the different generational component, might have a little bit more barriers in terms of learning how to use the headset, use the hand controllers, pick up things, teleport, things like that. But students are really excited, especially just starting out with some of the basics. Like there's a heart virtual reality room where they can go in as they're learning about the blood flow through the heart and see the different chambers of the heart and the valves, and just makes it more real, especially for those visual learners, to see what's happening physiologically. So far we're getting really good response.
Wonderful. And let's see. Also wanted to know, will quarterly updates include information on changes to the text?
That's a really good question. So far, since we published the nursing pharmacology book in June of 2020, we've had just a couple minor typos that we fixed immediately in the ebook. So really wasn't worth including in a quarterly update. But what we're planning now that the 5th book will be published and released, now we'll start the cycle of updating all the textbooks based on the NCLEX test plan when it's released, which should be shortly. And so in that case, we will come up with a plan either in the quarterly updates, or we'll include it in the section in the textbook. But we'll figure out that process in the next year or so to make it usable, for faculty that are currently using the textbook.
Wonderful. Okay, and it looks like there's one more question here. Are VR elements in all of the textbooks?
So there's virtual simulations are being added. They continue to be added to all the textbooks. So yes, there's at least one. Our goal is to continue to add those now that in our last year of the project, but we do have 24 virtual simulations that can be used as standalone. There's quite a few on OB simulations, just because we got a lot of feedback from faculty, especially during COVID. It's difficult to get students into OB floors, OB units, and see a birth, and take care of a newborn. So those virtual simulations give students the opportunity to practice doing that.
Awesome. I'm just scrolling back through to make sure I got everything.
I guess while you're looking, Katie, I'll show everyone a print copy of the text. This is what they look like when they're printed. They're really nicely done. They're color, and they're very affordable, I think. Kim, what are they, around $40? $40
to $50. I think the skills book, because it was so large, I can try to hold it up. I don't know if you can see it, but it was several pages long. So yeah, $40 to $50 is the retail price, is what I'm told, in bookstores.
And it looks like someone asked, with virtual simulation, do you have a clinical makeup time component?
Maybe tell me more about your question, but I know that from what I'm seeing, faculty use it for, like this week, for example, for some reason, there was a clinical group at CVTC that couldn't get into the long-term care center, either because of COVID or, because of infectious disease kind of protocol. So they went and used the virtual simulation and VR as a way to make that up. So and according to the NCSBN, up to 50% of clinical time can be replaced by simulation in general, as long as you're following the best practices of simulation. There are no new guidelines in terms of virtual simulation, but I expect that will be coming out soon, just because all the nursing programs dealt with the same issues in terms of getting into clinical sites during COVID. I see another question about the physical copy. So yes, the management textbook we anticipate will be available in the physical copy by Xanadu in January of 2023 for spring. So it's available for spring courses.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.